Welcome to episode 36 of Detour 365, and this is William the host, and I'm here with Bill, and we might be joined by others later on. But we are looking at Exodus 24, 9 through 14. This is one of those passages that you could easily miss, but it's very intriguing. And we will be discussing this, and it's staying with our theme of the humanity of God, and we'll see why in a second. But Bill's going to be reading from the translation of his choice, which is...
I will probably read from the Complete Jewish Bible again.
Alright, he's going to read from that. And,
Moshe, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 of the leaders went up, and they saw the God of... was something like a sapphire stone pavement, as clear as the sky itself. He did not reach out his hand against these notables of Israel. On the contrary, they saw God even as they were eating and drinking. Adonai said to Moshe, "Come up to me on the mountain and stay there. I will give you the stone tablets with the Torah and the mitzvah I have written on them so you can teach them." Moses got up. Also, Yehoshua, his assistant, and Moshe went up onto the mountain of God. To the leaders he said, "Stay here for us until we come back to you. See, Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a problem should turn to them."
very good. Now this little section was right after the covenant was confirmed, as it says here, and right before Moses goes up onto the mountain where he gets the commandments, and then you have the whole golden calf episode. And so I thought about whether we should talk about this little section or not, but I found it intriguing, and just for a number of reasons. It says they beheld, or they saw the God of Israel. They beheld God, and they ate and drank. This is one of the few instances where it's usually just Moses going up and communing with God, but in this case you have 70 of the elders that are going up there, and they're allowed to have this experience. It says that he did not lay his hands on these 70, these 70 men that were there. And you also have the image of this sapphire pavement. It's interesting that it describes that. I don't know, is there any symbolism in it being a sapphire pavement, or is it just... There's a lot of mystery here, I guess, in this passage. You're given this kind of this image that's very, I don't know, wonderful, surreal. something something you wouldn't forget, but it doesn't really explain, why the sapphire pavement. It describes God as having feet, that under his feet was something like a sapphire pavement. So it appears that God was in human form.
Yes.
So it's one of those instances in the Old Testament where God is in human form, and that's one of the reasons why we're looking at it. Did you find anything about the sapphire pavement?
No, I have not yet. I am looking.
I did not either. I looked into this, and now there probably is someone out there who might know something about this, but I just find it intriguing that we're given this description. We're told these details, but there has to be some reason for it, I would guess.
What little I found on that is just illustrating that God is providing this otherworldly environment with which to meet the leaders of Israel. One site I have found here, you may be uncomfortable with the idea that God uses a section of the firmament as a movable platform like a cosmic surfboard. He has taken part of his environment and allowed the leaders of Israel to join him at this place.
Now, in your translation, does it say it was a pavement of sapphire or like sapphire?
Like a sapphire stone, as clear as the sky itself.
And they're sitting on it.
Yes, they are. They are gathering on this place, and it's someplace special for the Israelites, because it was only there that a great number of the Israelites actually got to experience a relationship with God.
Yeah, other than Moses, God talks to Moses quite a bit, and they have a lot of one-on-one time, but I was thinking that this was up on the mountain, but this is not up. Moses goes up on the mountain after this, Mount Sinai. So,
yes, he's still, they are all still down at the foot of the mountain.
But somehow God transforms this area into something that looks like the sky.
Yes.
I just find this interesting because I can't imagine what it would have really looked like, other than, what would they be?
Have you looked outside at the sky today?
Well, yeah. I just, like, would they still see their other surroundings, or were they just kind of in this blue bubble sort of thing?
I don't know that. I think that they would have been aware of their other surroundings, and this was just a section of that environment that God transformed to have a place with which he could meet the elders of Israel.
And in describing God as having feet, do you see this as being because you have instances in the Old Testament where it seems like God the Son is appearing like pre-incarnate form. Moses, there are certain, I guess you could say, manifestations of God that you can't see. That, like, Moses was not allowed to see. Moses asks to see God's glory, and he wasn't allowed to see the whole of it.
Yes.
And it was said that he couldn't see all of God and survive, basically. So
it does not say they see his face. All it talks about are his feet, but it still anthropomorphizes the person of God.
Yeah.
And the environment stresses that this is a special and otherworldly place that they are permitted to gather. They saw God even as they were eating and drinking.
Now, do you think that is an expression of, like, the intimacy of the encounter, that they were allowed to eat and drink, in the presence? And does that say something about the length of the encounter as well? Or I don't want to say informality or casualness, but just, I guess intimacy would be the word.
I think that they were given this opportunity as a testimony, so they could provide testimony to the nation. We're still in those early stages where God is making this group of individuals that he has delivered from Egypt, and he is making them into a nation. He's making them into a separate people. They're all descended from the same family. And he is in the process of tying them together into a cohesive group. And that's why he's permitted all 70 of these, one translation says notables. The Revised Standard has it the chief men of the people of Israel. So in this place are gathered everyone that's important in all these families. All the leaders of these families are gathered together to eat and drink with God. And at that time, he is letting them know who and what he is to establish that nation as a people. Because this is the last time this happens.
Yeah, I mean, it is a unique encounter, and I find it interesting that, and I was looking at this and kind of wrestling with it, praying about where to, what this means for us, because it is an interesting account. It's like one of those. There are similar descriptions of things, like in the Book of Enoch. Descriptions of being in the throne room of God, and there are other. But in this case, it's kind of what happens right after that kind of surprises me. It's that they immediately after, well, I guess not immediate. Moses is gone for an extended period of time on the mountain, and it's almost like they forget about this encounter, and they make the golden calf. They're kind of quick to turn away, and this is kind of a theme that keeps occurring. They witness the Red Sea part. They witness all these miracles and things that God does, and God's deliverance of them out of Egypt, and later on the provision of the manna and all that. But for some reason, they keep these people, and it could be a testimony as well about human nature. Like if we witness things that God does for us, even if they're really miraculous, we can be quick to forget. At least we see that in this case, because Moses leaves and he's up on the mountain, and while he's up on the mountain, that's when they make the golden calf and do all of that. And included were, Aaron was one of the main people that. Aaron made the idol, right?
Yep.
And also these 70 people that were there, that were in charge, that were the leaders, were in on it as well.
Yep.
As we understand. But I just wonder, how could that happen after you witness something like this?
It speaks, I fear, it speaks to the very nature of humankind. God knows what's going to happen. He knew what was going to happen when he pulled them together. And the subsequent events help establish what's being illustrated. But here we look at the ease with which these men felt as they were gathered with their God. And it shows how lightly we can consider God if we permit it. How casual people can be about God unless we truly consider it and think about him. Yes, they sat around and they ate and they drank with their God. He made himself known to them, and they were just very casual about that relationship. I think God wants to encourage us to not be that casual. I think he wants us to feel comfortable with him, but also it's important that we not take him for granted.
And do you think that also? There is this thought that I assume that we all probably have had, that if we saw more miracles, or if we do see miracles and we do see God at work around us, but we think if we saw the things that the people who, Jesus healing people, and if we could go back to that time and we saw that, we think that we would act differently than a lot of the. Because there were people that saw Jesus heal paralyzed people and blind people, and feed the 5,000, and the disciples saw that. They saw Jesus feed the 5,000, and even then they still. It's almost like it didn't stick. I don't know.
Well, it's again illustrating what people are like. Illustrating that no matter what we say, we tend to take God for granted, and unless we want, on one hand we say we want more miracles and that, but it's not, that doesn't do anything for us. If we see miracles happen in our lives, if we experience these things, it is for us to choose to not take God for granted. He shouldn't have to be performing different miracles, although he does. He shouldn't have to be doing that all of the time to secure our faith and belief in him. He wants this relationship with us, and he wants us to take it seriously. He wants us to know him and believe him, and if we do that, and don't allow ourselves to become flippant in our relationship. How many people do we, as individuals, have as good friends? How do we treat the friends that we have? How seriously do we take our relationships? All of this is tied up, and God is trying to illustrate for us, I think, that even though this relationship started out with fantastic things happening to these people, he is doing fantastic things with these people, that they very easily turn to anything else once their immediate needs are not being met. And God is using this as an illustration for us to know that that's unacceptable.
Yeah.
We look at the environment that he placed these 70 men in, and then Moses went up and received the tablets of the law, the commandments. And when he comes back down, the people are just worshiping an idol made from the riches that they acquired in Egypt. How often do we do that? How often do we leave church on Sunday and go and serve the world? It's a repeated theme throughout the book.
Yeah.
He is trying to show us what is important, and he's trying to illustrate the lengths at which he has gone to cause people to believe in him. And how do people react?
Yeah. Are you seeing how much time we have left before it cuts off, or before break time?
I don't have a counter on my phone to
maybe
tell me that.
We will be right back here in a few minutes, if that sounds good.
Okay.
Didn't want to break you off mid-thought there. So.
Well, that's I think it's a good place to stop.
Yep. So we will be right back for the conclusion of this, and hang tight. And we are back. So this is, I mean, the imagery here is I mean, I really find it fascinating. I think it does say a lot, as we've been saying, about human nature and how we can take our relationship with God for granted, and even the experiences that we have, the spiritual highs and the when we experience a healing or some sort of occurrence that is like a synchronicity or these things that you could say like an answer to prayer. We can quickly forget a lot of these things, and I mean one solution is to keep track of them, or try to keep track of them by writing them down, or having something to where we can go back and remember all of these things that happened. But also it seems like it's a continuous choice.
I think it's one reason that God tells us later in Scripture to, pray continuously. If we stay in contact with Him continuously, we won't have this attitude.
Yeah.
Hi, by the way.
Oh, yes. Welcome to the podcast, Nathaniel.
Thank you. It seems to keep making me disappear for some reason, but video anyway.
Well, we can hear you, so that's a good thing.
That is good.
I should have sent you the passage we were going to be looking at, but
it's Exodus 24, 9 through 14.
I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make it or not, but yeah. Made it for the second half here.
We are
glad that you
have made it. So, so kind of the gist is that, well, I guess we could read it again. I could read a different translation.
Is it long?
No, it's just a few verses.
Oh, alrighty.
So then Moses, Aaron, this is the ESV. Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel went up, and they saw the God of Israel. There was under his feet, as it were, a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. And he did not lay his hand on the chief men of the people of Israel. They beheld God and ate and drank. So these 70 people plus Moses and Aaron, and they have this experience of, and we don't know if they saw, what they saw aside from, said they saw God's feet, and they saw this pavement that looked like sapphire stone, that kind of looked like the sky. Just, and they ate and drank, and they beheld God in some form. So anyway, this was quite a memorable experience that they had. And shortly thereafter, Moses goes up onto Mount Sinai, and then and we'll talk about this next time, but they make the golden calf, and it's almost as if I see this as speaking about our human nature, how we can take God for granted, and even these like miraculous experiences that we can have, even if in the moment we are in awe, or it's a really moving experience, we can quickly forget. And we see this over and over again, actually, in the Bible, and in this, in particular, this group of people, because God delivers them from different situations and does miraculous things, and then they kind of go back to what they're faithful for a little while, but then they go back to their they kind of turn away.
Yeah, complacency.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly, yeah, and you would think that if you had an experience like this, and they also saw the Red Sea part, they saw all the plagues that happened in Egypt.
Well, I think humans are like physically, but also mentally, which is probably also physically, ultimately, but we tend to like kind of operate at the lowest energy state generally. Or like we trend towards that, so like, why would you do something that's harder than necessary? Like, I feel like our brains are always asking us, like, or we're predisposed or built such that, we prefer to do things easier if possible, as long as things continue to not go bad, then I feel like we're kind of built to sort of test that envelope a little bit. As far as, okay, well, I don't have to do this or that, and in the absence of consequences or reminders that induce fear of the consequences, I think we trend towards that very naturally. I think that's also known as complacency.
Yeah.
But complacency is sort of it's on the same spectrum as just like effort optimization kind of thing. Sort of like, why would you walk around? You've got to go someplace, and the first day you walk a very inefficient route, and the second day you realize, I could have walked a better route. So the next day you walk that more efficient route, and then but maybe it's closer. And then the next day you're like, but there's another route that's like close to this construction zone or something. Maybe there's a sign that says don't enter, but it's only for like 3 feet. So you're like, that's okay. No bad consequences there. And you do that because the motivation is, let's streamline this process. Essentially, let's do something that's easier. Easier isn't always worse. It's always better, in fact, until it's not. So.
I guess on a very practical level, we can take the meaningful experiences that we have, for, not that we forget them, but I guess an example might be if you, well, I mean, we saw the eclipse back in April, right?
Uh-huh.
That was really quite a sight, you know. But it is kind of, I mean, it's not like it didn't happen, but, you know, the emotions you were feeling, or the, you know, kind of the, I want to say, let's see, I guess what you were feeling in that moment, you know, it didn't last. Well, I guess you still look back on it, if you think about it, you still look back on it and think that, oh, that was quite a thing to see, you know. But
yeah,
it is almost like we have these experiences, and I do wonder, you know, and we kind of mentioned this in the first part, that, you know, there are a lot of people that think, like, well, if I saw more miracles, or if I saw more things happening, you know, then I would have faith. But it's almost like it's like a choice, like you have to, you know, like the experiences help. I mean, having experiences and helps, but, you know, there were plenty of people who saw all the things that God was doing, and in the book of Exodus, and delivering them from Egypt, and but they still made the golden calf, and they still, you know, decided to do that when Moses was gone for a little while. And there were a lot of people who saw that Jesus healing people and doing all kinds of miracles, and still it's like it didn't, you know, they became complacent, and they, I guess, had a lot of enthusiasm right in the moment, but then, you know, later on, it didn't really change them. So I don't know. I mean, I just, Bill, it looked like you were about to say something.
What does it take to get and keep our attention? Why should God have to continue over and over and over again proving himself to us, proving that he is God? And that's what's happening. You know, they are being shown amazing things. And what does it take to keep our attention? Why should it take other stuff to keep our attention?
Yeah.
How many miracles do I have to do today and then do tomorrow to show that I am God? That's something I think God wants us, about which God wants us to think.
Yeah. And it's at the end of one of the Gospels, after Jesus rose from the dead, and he appeared to a number of the followers. I think it's in Matthew. I think it's at the end of Matthew. He appeared to them, and it said, now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain which Jesus had directed them, and they saw him. They worshipped him, but some doubted. So it's on. I mean, they saw him be crucified, and they are seeing him again. I don't know. I just I see this continuous kind of theme, and but that particular story might not fit fully this example, but we do see we do see this over and over again, how God will do things in the lives of people or groups of people, and they will be grateful in the moment, but then they will eventually grow complacent and turn away, and then, well, I mean, we see this a lot in the Old Testament, that cycle of that happening. So anyway, I see this as a, just in wondering why this was included in the story of Exodus, because it is kind of interesting that we're given these details about this encounter. I see it as just a cautionary tale for us, but I mean also it is a testimony about our nature, and that I mean, I think it does say a lot about faith, and I don't know what else I can add at the moment to that, but Bill, do you have anything? I mean, what you said was pretty.
I think that's the heart of it.
Yeah.
As people, what does it take to keep our attention? And why should it? I believe that is one of the points that God is making through illustrating this series of events that we see coming now and coming up. God is displaying, it is opening part of himself to the leaders of Israel so they can share this with their families. And they go back down and build this. Well, we know that they build this silver calf, this golden calf.
Yeah.
They build an idol. They turn, and I would like to think that God is keeping my attention better than that. I know that he is God.
Well said.
How many times does he have to act decisively in my life for me to choose to maintain a relationship with him?
Well, I do find this interesting from the perspective of, I think I've said more than a couple of times now that I think that, like the lessons in the Bible and kind of add together to viewing what is said as like coming to know and have a relationship with God better is the same thing as saying, like having a better relationship with the truth because of the ultimate pretty much truth that like philosophical truth that I find in the Bible. So when you don't pay attention to God, or when you don't pay attention to, you're really kind of saying like when you don't pay attention to what God has to say, which is the same thing as saying, to me, you're not paying attention to what's actually true. You're taking actions that are incongruent with like essentially like providing a good future for yourself and other people or something like that. Then you get these reminders once you get far enough off that pathway, which grab your attention, put you back on that closer to it, whether you want to or not, or maybe that, yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of like that same principle of...
Kind of like bowling with the gutter protectors up slightly, except for they're not fully up, but
yeah,
you go too far off the straight and narrow, life does tend to straighten you out. Sort of, or you go down like a spiraling, not good way.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, I do think that we're given these stories and this because this will happen over and over again especially in the Old Testament, and we might feel an element of frustration that why don't these people get it? Why don't But I do think it is it is pointing at us also that we are to have the awareness that we are also that way, and we might assume that we're different, but I think it helps to be aware that that is the case. And to be aware of complacency and that it can creep on us silently, slowly and silently, I guess. And I think that also fits with what Jesus said in the Beatitudes, and there are different interpretations of this, but blessed are the poor in spirit. And I've heard that interpreted as seeing your continuous need for growth, and not assuming or believing that you've arrived at like the highest point, or that you are. I mean, there's the parable of being connected to the vine, and if we're left on our own, we're not really going to do anything. We need to stay connected. And I think it is dangerous to assume that we're going to, like, on our own, that we're going to, live righteously, or, I mean, even more importantly,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I think that comes the role of having someone to act as a corrective factor to you, because it's not so difficult to slowly fool yourself about something.
Yeah.
Like over days or months or years, you can convince yourself of any number of things.
Yeah.
And especially as far as like complacent actions.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Because you can make like explanations, I guess, in your own head, and maybe that's because you know the effort required to not take those, what's probably ultimately like some sort of shortcut. Right? So that's when another person might come in, either like your boss or your partner, or your colleague or friend, and say, hey, like, and partially it's probably, in my mind, I feel like it's probably because there isn't actually that direct effort required of them. Like, they can point things out without having to actually undergo the effort of the correction. Like, I've felt like that's largely the role in kind of the role in leadership, like how it actually works, is that, like, a lot of times you have to have that. That's why you kind of have, like, inspectors come to a ship that aren't part of ship's company or anything like that. Part of that, I feel like, is because they're impartial, right? And so is your boss. Your boss is sort of impartial to your own troubles. And some impartiality is kind of required to, like, not... It doesn't push them into making potentially the same sort of excuses you would to yourself. I don't feel like I explained that very well. But
yeah, I see what you're saying, yeah.
Kind of like, in a nutshell, it's kind of like you have to have that kind of, like, quote-unquote calloused observer in order to keep you truthful. Otherwise, it's known as accountability, I suppose.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
That's why people have, like, accountability partners when going to the gym or things like that, or like any other diets and stuff like that. It's because for that exact reason.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective on it. Yeah, for sure.
One thing in the background that I think this series illustrates, this step through the scriptures, is God's willing to open himself up, but he certainly does not give limitless chances. Uh, I don't know whether it's a point that he, well, I think it is he knows whether or not you are going to come to love him or not. Because look at how he pulls the plug on the people of Israel. He does try to remind them over and over and over. And as we will see with this group of people, he gets tired.
Yeah, and they spend 40 years in the wilderness, and they don't make it to the...
None of them made it to the promised land.
Yeah. Which includes these 70 people that were there that witnessed this.
That's right.
Great sight, you know.
And I think that is important. I think it's important that we realize that I don't want to say there's a point God gives up on us. But there is a point at which God knows that his efforts are to no avail.
Yeah, and I think that I don't think providing consequences congruent with your stated standard is giving up on anyone. It's actually the only possible way to, well, first of all, make sure that the standard happens. It's probably there for a reason. Second of all, it's the only possible way that anyone would actually ever follow it, and in the end help themselves. Because if you consistently say, like if they put a line in the road that says don't drive over this, but it's like a shorter way to go, and getting back to that shortcut stuff, but then literally there are zero consequences to doing it ever. Everyone is going to start driving over this line.
Yes.
But maybe, I don't know, I guess in order for that to be a good summary or similarity or whatever, there would have to be some consequences, but not.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely like kind of the other side of the coin. And this, I guess this side would be, they witness this sort of miraculous transformation of their environment, and they had this great experience. But also, we see examples of what you're talking about too in the Old Testament, where, especially in the book of Judges, we see this. That they will have trouble with a certain group of people who will be oppressing them, and they'll cry out to God, and God will deliver them through some person that comes along, but then they'll eventually kind of fall away, and as Jenny barking over there. So yeah, I do kind of see that as kind of the same, negative and positive side of it, So.
I feel like it's kind of like traffic signs or like traffic stops, like or stoplights, right? Like maybe if they stopped enforcing any kind of penalty for running a traffic light, sure, most of the time you wouldn't, like, it would be chaos at that traffic stop after a while, but probably most of the time you went through there, you wouldn't get injured or anything. But there's a reason for the stoplights.
Yeah.
So there's a good reason for the rule. But if you don't enforce it with consequences, people aren't going to follow it in the end. So you have to provide consequences in order to help the very people overall.
Yeah.
Because actually, it's probably going to be faster in heavy traffic, especially like unless it was just chaos at that intersection. It'd be faster to follow the traffic signals.
Yeah.
So it's going to help them overall. But the whole system's going to break down if you don't actually provide consequences to those people.
Yeah.
Or to a few of them.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I can't remember the exact passage, but it says, God disciplines those whom He loves. I think that's in somewhere in there.
Well, and like, why do we not? I mean, it's definitely a fine line, but if you see like someone you care about doing something that you know is not in their best interest or something, I don't know, what stops you from saying something?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Some sort of I mean, in some cases, like, you might look at a person and just recognize, like, it really wouldn't just make any difference. It'd just be a negative thing overall. But I think there are some cases where we see some people, and it's like, well, we could say something, but we don't, because it's like, I don't want them to think poorly of me, essentially, or something like that.
Yeah.
And the reason I said that kind of stuff was because, like, is that, like, providing consequences or corrections or holding someone accountable is not, and that is how to care for them.
Well, and we'll definitely see that coming into play as we look next week at the what happens with the golden calf episode and consequences of that, and that'll be part of our series also, because Moses does intercede with God, and it mentions that God relents from we'll get to that. We'll get to that next week, but we are going to conclude there, and we thank you for listening, and we will continue on in the book of Exodus next week, and we hope you have a good week, and take care.